Hello everybody and welcome to Toy to You, Curator's Corner, episode number 12. My name's Sean Brosnan, I'm a curator at Toy to Otago Settlers Museum in Dunedin. I've been making these short videos about early Dunedin history as a way of providing infotainment to our museum visitors during the coronavirus lockdown when they can't actually come into the museum. Today's story we're going to look again at Charles Kettle's house, a building that we looked at in episode 3, a drawing of the shoreline in 1849. It's worth remembering that Kettle and his survey party had been on the ground in Dunedin and Port Chalmers since February 1846, so for over 2 years before the first party of Otago settlers arrived in March and April of 1848. Charles Kettle is a critical figure in Dunedin history, especially when we consider that he was just such a young man. He was only 24 when the New Zealand Company appointed him to be the principal surveyor for the new Edinburgh settlement in September 1845. And nor did he have any formal qualifications as a surveyor or town planner. He had simply learnt on the job after emigrating to Wellington in 1839 and getting a position as a cadet on its survey. Back in his native Kent, he had in fact been a maths teacher. Now, laid off by the New Zealand Company in Wellington in 1843, Kettle returned to England and locked on to the proposed Scottish settlement in Otago as his best hope for further advancement. His dedication to its promotion was ultimately rewarded with the job of designing and laying out the site of Dunedin. And with this important post secured, Kettle was able to marry the 21-year-old Amelia Omer, and 5 months later, the couple set sail from England for New Zealand. The Kettles originally lived in a house at Port Chalmers that had been built for the previous surveyor, Frederick Tuckett, and then moved into Dunedin and erected his house just above the landing site that we looked at in the last episode. Now this was the building in the drawing from 1849 that we looked at in a previous episode, and it was here that Amelia Kettle gave birth to her first child, a daughter named Elizabeth, on the 2nd of March 1847. Elizabeth Kettle was the first European girl born on the site of Dunedin, and that status later gave her a preeminence in early settler circles that is important to this story. A few months after her birth, Charles Kettle wrote a letter describing Dunedin as the initial survey work wound down without any sign at all of settlers arriving from Scotland. It gives us a clue to the strange state of anticipation in a communications void that his team had existed in. Dunedin is now almost deserted, there being only 5 houses in the town inhabited, and we have for the present almost given up hopes of the arrival of the settlers. It is really to be lamented that a country possessing such capabilities as this should remain neglected and unimproved. I hope the next vessel coming down will bring us some definite intelligence of the fate of the settlement. So imagine what it must have been like for the Kettles when the John Wycliffe did finally appear the following March. Picture the scene. Amelia Kettle and her 1-year-old daughter standing under that veranda and watching a little boat running up onto the landing site just in front of their house and Captain Cargill stepping ashore. It did mean immediate inconvenience for them, however, as this letter by Kettle in May 1848 makes clear. I have not been able to make a step towards getting the last quarter's accounts made up, as ever since the arrival of Captain Cargill I have scarcely had a place where I could quietly write a letter. One part of my office being taken up as a sleeping apartment for some of the ladies of his family, and the remainder almost choked up with packages. And my own house too has been filled with Mr. Cargill's family till very lately. Things started off pretty well between Cargill and Kettle, but eventually, like most people who worked with Cargill, there was a falling out. This cartoon by James Brown captures the two men in the middle of a legal battle for control of the survey office in Dunedin in 1851. Kettle lost out in these power struggles and withdrew to life in South Otago as a sheep farmer from the mid-1850s. He proved successful enough at that to be able to retire in 1860, returning to live in Dunedin. Ironically, he was killed soon after by a key defect in the town that he had designed. He caught typhoid fever in mid-1862, investigating the town's inadequate sanitation system in the midst of the gold rushes, and died. He left behind a large family, all of whom did pretty well as young colonials. Elizabeth married a brilliant young Irish lawyer, James Macassey, and had 5 children with him before he also died young in 1880. She had a long, long widowhood, but she prospered and over time became increasingly notable as that first European girl born in Dunedin. Which brings us back to her birth in Princes Street in 1847. Now, in 1932, the Early Settlers Association decided to mark the Pioneers' landing spot in Water Street with a bronze plaque. A local surveyor used Charles Kettle's original survey field books to work out exactly where it had been, to within 8 inches, he claimed, and Elizabeth McCasey was the special guest chosen to unveil the plaque. She was old and she was frail, but she was Dunedin's oldest citizen, someone who had been born literally within a stone's throw of the plaque, and perhaps witnessed the arrival of that first boat from her mother's arms. And isn't that just an amazing thing to consider? Dunedin, the vibrant modern city of the 1930s, built of stone and steel, with its telephones and telegraphs, tramcars and automobiles, aeroplanes and all the rest of it, all achieved within the lifetime of that little girl born within sight of the landing place. She died just a month later, aged 85. So perhaps next time that you're walking along Princes Street and past Water Street, take a glance down at that plaque in the footpath, and then look up across Princes Street and imagine that house with Amelia Kettle standing there holding that little baby in her arms and watching as the future landed on the doorstep at that landing place with all the uncertainty and enormous potential that came with it.